Hey guys, today's topic is serious. Students of Reddit who had a sexual relationship with a teacher. How did it start and how did it turn out? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. I guess I technically had a sexual relationship with a teacher. She was the lab TA for my invertebrate zoology lab, and refused to do anything with me until after the class. After classes, we partied and hooked up quite a lot. After a year of us still being together, other TAs started dating undergrads. 6-7 years later, we're married and have a kid together. I fell in love with a workshop supervisor at my university that guides the workshop that I need for my education. She is about a year older than I am. I am doing some small arts and crafts and leatherworking. She was interested in getting something and she bought something custom. I can't remember how it started out, but for some reason or another, we had some drinks which ended in a night spent together in a sexual relationship. We discovered an attraction to each other. She went to the faculty director with the situation and explained it. Since she cannot give marks on my work and is only a guide in the eyes of the university, they approved of the relationship. That was about 3 years ago. We are still together as I am finishing my education. The relationship moved on from the sexual flirt which it all started with to something deep. We live together for 2 years now and she helps me something with running the 2 companies that I set up aside my study. When I finish my education next year I will even propose to her. Small edit. I just want to clarify that at the start of this relation we well past the 18 years old mark. It started innocently enough. She was my chorus teacher, fresh out of college and only 6 years older than me. My brother WA actually dating her friend from high school. I used to cut class and say I had a music lesson and we'd just hang in the music room, talk about books, music, movies. Then she started complaining about her relationship a lot, needing hugs, which I was more than happy to help with. It eventually turned to making out, and we finally started hooking up when she gave me rides home after school. I honestly felt like I found $1 million, but couldn't tell anybody about it. It was weird. Then she got weird, asking for her hugs in front of the entire class. I knew everyone knew. I started riding home with my friends again. Then she started just showing up at my house. Had a very awkward convo with my dad who knew exactly what was going on, but was so impressed he just kept saying damn she's pretty. Ghosting hadn't been invented back then, but Elle did the best Elle could. Eventually she chilled out. A few months later Elle stopped by her room during our normal hang ses time, and she apologized. Told me she was just going through a lot with her shitty boyfriend and needed some attention from someone that actually liked her. We didn't talk much after that. Elle graduated soon after, but we're friends on Facebook and she actually married a decent guy and has a nice family. I'm very relieved we were never found out. It would have been devastating to both of us. I went to a vocational high school and attended the culinary program for 3 years. The baking instructor, pastry chef, was 7 years older than me and we grew up in the same small town. When I turned 18 and he left for another profession, we went on a few dates and had sex a couple times. We weren't a good fit together and ended on amicable terms. Pretty uneventful. When I was 19 I dated a professor at my university for a few months. I wasn't his student, but he taught some of my friends. We met randomly at a club, and I had no idea he was a professor at my uni until a few days later when we started texting. He was really hot. He had dark hair and bright blue eyes and told me that his female students would flirt with him in office hours. He was 33, so very young for a prof, but pretty old for me at the time. It was fun for a bit. He was not happy when we realized he taught some of my friends. The day we realized he taught my friends was when I was at his apartment a couple weeks after meeting and I asked to see some of his class materials. He thought it would be interesting if I could tell the difference between a BS essay and a great essay, even if I wasn't familiar with the subject. So I started reading and realized the BS essay with a failing grade had my friend's name at the top. He was very upset, because apparently it's some sort of privacy violation that I was looking at her failed assignment. But I thought it was sexy that he thought my friend's essay sucked. Really played up his position of power in my mind. So I actually didn't know she was my teacher. She was maybe 23-24 and I just turned 17. I was in California during summer vacation. Went to Disneyland, California Adventure, all the fun stuff. Met her while in line for Winnie the Pooh ride. None of my friends wanted to go with me. We had fun, hit it off, and eventually go to her hotel room. Spent the weekend meeting up and hanging out and then we parted ways. First day of the new semester comes around and I see her in the classroom and I'm excited. I didn't know she went to this school, and so I went in and sat down, and she goes up to the front of the room and introduced herself to everyone. Then we do the whole get to know each other thing, and what we did over summer. Got to me, her face turned purple like she couldn't breathe. Had a crush on one of my grad school teachers for a year and a half. I was into everything about her. Looks, brain, everything. I ended up teaching the same subject many years later, and I still use the notes and materials from her classes with my own students. She was engaged to someone else, so I never even thought about anything ever happening. It was a nice fantasy. Then out of the blue, she calls my cell phone and tells me that she's thinking of getting into yoga and knows that I am into yoga, so would I get a drink with her and tell her more. I was not exactly experienced with hookups, and I actually took her at her word. I went expecting to talk about yoga and go home afterwards. We ended up getting totally wasted, making out in the middle of a bar. And then I walked her home, where I kept saying I'm sorry and this definitely isn't happening, and I'll just get you to your door and go home. It did happen, but the joke was on her. She got a few seconds of the worst sex of her life and then got to listen to me in the bathroom for a while. The next day she found me in the hallway and told me that it was a huge mistake and asked me not to tell anyone. Nobody would believe me anyway, so I agreed. I can honestly say I wish the entire thing had never happened. She got married and moved on with her life. I ended up having to take her husband's class before I could graduate. I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes, and when I went to leave she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text messages over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. I'm not a student anymore. It happened in the 90s when I was probably 8 or 9 and went on for more than a year. It started with making me sit on his thighs often, and I could feel his erection. I never knew what to think of it, as I never got any training or attention from parents about situations of sexual abuse. It went on from there. After 22 years of being a biologically straight guy, I still remember what that dirty stinking peanuts tasted like. The experience gave me depression and anxiety and inability to trust a relationship, and get freaked out when I see a kid sitting on any man's lap. I woke up after a night full of bad dreams feeling sick in my stomach. Forgive me if I don't respond any further. And thanks immensely for your kind words and incredible support. It's important to protect and keep every child away from such negative forces, cause we remember. My religious studies college professor. She was hilarious and brilliant and always brought her interests up in class, and they usually aligned with mine. It started off with what felt like on-topic to class discussions, then into more friendly casual conversations about books and movies. Then it definitely transitioned into flirting, which was weird, because I'm also female and had never had feelings for another girl, so I thought it could just be some weird fantasy in my head and I was just making something out of nothing. Anyways, fast forward, semester ends. I'm out of her class. I submit my final at noon. By 1 p.m., she emails me my final grade and says, "I'm all done submitting your grades, so you're officially no longer my student. Congrats on passing the class and good luck." So I sent back an email with a song attached, and then the emailing went on from there before we officially hung out, which led to sex, which led to a 3-year relationship. We moved in together for about a year, but it ultimately didn't work out cause we wanted different things long term. But we ended on good terms, and I'm grateful for the relationship now 5 years out, as it helped me realize what I want in a partner. I now have an amazing boyfriend, and I heard she recently got married to a woman she started dating after me. Happened to me when I was in 7th grade. She was my conversations teacher. To be honest, she was my first crush, which started when I was in 4th grade. She knew my parents, so sometimes I had to stay with her when they were late to pick me up from school. It happened 2 months before finals. She told me that she wanted to kiss me and if I was okay with this. I changed my school and she left town some years later. The dilemma is, although I remember time spent with her very fondly, I wouldn't want any other kid to be in the situation as I was in. My 8th grade teacher. This was during the 80s, before all the scandals, when no one really cared if a female teacher was spending a lot of time alone with one of her students. I was 14. She was mid-40s and a family friend who had known me since I was a little kid. She asked me to volunteer for a school activity that had us spending time together after class and occasionally off campus. My mum knew her, so wasn't bothered I was spending so much time with her. She had always teased and playfully touched me as a kid. When we were alone after class, she started touching me more and flirting and talking about intimate things like a divorce and asking me if I had a girlfriend yet. She escalated the intimacy through the year, pushing boundaries a little more each time. We started having sex that summer. It went on for about 3 months. She ended it once I went to high school. My family moved out of state after my freshman year. I had a long talk with her before leaving and we parted on good terms. I never spoke to her again, but heard she eventually remarried and became vice principal at another school. She died a few years ago. I'm almost 50 and still think about her quite often. Not sure if this counts, but my particular field has a mandatory internship period after graduating college and passing national board exams. During your internship you have a preceptor in charge of guiding you and teaching you the things the books didn't, like physical techniques and state-specific laws. School taught the national curriculum, not the state-unique laws. The preceptor is often a supervisor or manager at the facility that gave you an internship, but could be anyone with a license in the field. Internships are extremely competitive and extremely hard to come by in my area, so I started out doing grunt work at a facility to eventually earn an internship. My preceptor was the supervisor of the firm and more than a decade my senior. During the internship you understandably spend a lot of time together, because the intern is not allowed to perform any job duties without supervision. So he has the same schedule, worked on the same projects, and ate lunch together every day. After about 4 months of this, we both come back from holiday break and as we're catching up we both say we have big news. His news turned out to be that he filed for divorce with his wife. He had been wanting to for a long time, but talking with me about infidelity finally gave him the push. His ex-wife had cheated on him twice and he had proof. My news was that I broke up with my long-term boyfriend. I spent the holiday with my sister who saw I was miserable, because my boyfriend wasn't respecting me, and ultimately she gave me the sister talk of what are you actually getting out of this relationship. We both kind of looked at each other and blushed and went back to eating lunch in a bit of awkward silence. It took another 4 months of awkward brushing up against each other while trying to work. Physical job. Awkward radio songs coming on while working. Don't Stand So Close to Me by Sting and the Police. Caught Up in You by .38 Special. Young Girl by Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, just to name a few. That all came on spontaneously on the radio while we were working together on more than one occasion, and veiled flirting before we finally went on a date together. He continued being my preceptor for the remaining 4 months of my internship and we dated in secret since he was my immediate superior and responsible for whether I got my license in the field. Then when I got my license we both went public with the relationship and shortly after moved to a different firm where he was immediately promoted to management and I was promoted to management within a year. 5 years later we are both still doing well with the new firm, married, own a house together, and our first baby is due in a month. So mine has a happy ending. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school, so he was only like 22, 23 maybe. Does that count? I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner when we had snuck a bottle of passion pop in, so we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot and before I knew it his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school, so spent the next week fricking around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty freaking hot to be honest and I still think about him from time to time. Please subscribe if you like the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.